welcome to Quirky Queen's Journals. My name's Kirsten. So today I am using the gel plate with some of my handmade stencils, and I'm using pan pastels and children's paint sticks, which are advertised as tempera paint, but it's the child version. I'm sure the professional version is much more professional. Anyway, so with the pan pastels, what I'm doing is I'm sort of making a series. Well, I decided to make it like a little series of 4 paintings because the pan pastels leave very good ghost prints. That's where the idea came from. So I'm using makeup sponges to apply the pan pastel, because it's over a large area, so the little soft tools they give you with the pan pastels, you'd be there all day. So the pan pastels go on quite opaque. So this is the top layer of the painting that I'm applying just now. And so, you can vary the pressure with which you apply them. So you've seen me there holding up to create a sharp edge. So that yellow ochre, I created a sharp edge and, towards the top on the right hand side. And then I kind of graduated it out at the bottom. I approach this a few different ways in each painting. Here I very much treat each stencil as a kind of single entity, whereas later on I more look at the negative spaces and not really consider what stencils are making them. It's nice to sort of try and have a different perspective, when you're approaching your artwork in general. If you try and look at it right now, looking at it from the view of filling in the gaps in the stencil, and then maybe another perspective would be the edges around the stencils, and then another space could be actually the gaps that are created between all the stencils. So there's a few different approaches you can take. Anyway, these pan pastels, I quite like that they've been combined with the paint sticks, because the pan pastels are very expensive and the paint sticks are very cheap. But they work very well together because the pan pastels give quite a solid, consistent, uniform colour, whereas the paint sticks are a bit smeary and very inconsistent, and really it's hard for you to vary the pressure that you're putting it down with, because on the gel plate you're kind of having to drag it on a bit. So the two of them, just the contrast between them works very well. Now the colours in the pan pastels and the paint sticks look garishly bright, but they're actually not. They work very well together. The colours can be layered on each other. They don't turn muddy. I was just surprised at how lovely they were together. I didn't rate the pan pastels when I first got them. I thought they were overpriced for what they were. But the more I've used them, the more I've realised that actually they are very useful to have. They do a job that is hard to use another product to do. They also last a long time, because I have used these a lot. I've had them over a year now, used them a lot, and they're still, some of them look barely touched, and there's certainly none of them. I've not seen the bottom of any jars or anything like that yet. So although they are expensive, they are an investment. So I've left this in about applying the pan pastels and the paint sticks purely because of the way that I'm applying them. I'm trying to blend them together. I'm trying to use different pressures. I'm trying to layer them. Because see there, I had some of the yellow ochre and I've went straight over it with the green. I've got the blue curling round. I'm also aware that this is the first layer, so this is the top of the painting. One thing with hindsight I would have done differently here is I'm laying these down quite thickly, so when I'm layering on top of them, because they are quite opaque, you know, if they're a thick layer, so when you're putting other colours on top, they're not getting the chance to shine through the same, because, you know, the layer's too thick. Whereas if I'd put them on and left, it wasn't a full coverage in the area, and also it was lighter. So, for example, that blue, I'll use blue because it's a primary colour. If I'd just done a very thin layer of that blue, and then I could have came over that with a yellow or a red, and it would have gave it a kind of green or a purple shade in certain areas where it maybe peeked through if there was a gap, or, you know, if it was a thin layer. This is also, you know, a fresh application of pan pastels. So when we lift this print, it will be a lot brighter than the second print. Not even brighter, maybe a bit more solid colour. I really enjoyed applying these as well. It was quite therapeutic, and it was making me think about, you know, because I was graduating some and I was putting sharp edges on some, and the layering, it was making me be more aware of colour choice and why I'm choosing a certain colour. I've also tried to be thoughtful about colours next to colours as well. I tended to rely on the complementary system before, so purple and yellow will always contrast, so put them together. And I'm trying to just be a bit more thoughtful and a bit braver as well about the colour choices actually, and not just relying on one sort of system of the way you choose colours. I hope that makes sense. The other thing as well, this makeup sponge, you can see it leaves quite square edges, so but I find that patting it down over and over and over, you know, helps reduce that. Now that red is a very strong, I find all pastel, you know, the soft pastel reds as well, and the pan pastel red, the red is always a very strong colour with them. I think the pigments must be released very easily in whatever binder they use. We are at the finishing touches of the pan pastels, and you will see how good it is when I remove the stencils. Do you see the clear, sharp edge? It's really quite amazing. Now, as you layer on the gel plate with these pan pastels do make it, the stencils are less likely to sort of suction themselves to the gel plate. So you do need to hold them down a bit for the next layer. You'll see what I mean. I loved how that turned out. So that's, the rest are like masks, and that square with the 9 circles inside, it's more like a stencil, and I love how they work together. So this layer, I'm repositioning them. I've got a clear image of what's there, so I'm able to kind of put them in different places. I'm going to use mostly white and a little bit of black pan pastel. I find the black's very strong and overpowering, so I use that very sparingly. But the white, I like how the white on top of the other pan pastels behaves. Oh, it's hard to describe. It's almost like it creates a shadow of a shape, but it's not a shadow because it's lighter. It's like a subtle impression of the shape. So that circle won't appear quite like a circle, but there'll be the impression of it being there. When I use the black, I do press very lightly as well, because it really is very dominating over all the other colours. Do you see how good they are at, you know, the sort of, when you're layering them, there's so many different depths of that white there just by, you know, the amount of times that you're pressing it down. And that's a really nice thing to work with because it's kind of reliable. That you know it's, you know, you just press it once and you've got a very light, you know, a very light indication of the white. Whereas with paint, things like that, can, you know, getting the amount down can be difficult to achieve. Do you see how lightly I'm pressing with the black though? And I'm just putting it down in tiny areas. So I've been trying to learn some new techniques recently, using different mediums and trying to learn a bit more as well about sort of art theory. I've been using water mixable oils, watercolours, soft pastels. I've done a lot with them recently, and I've been trying to learn about colour theory a lot more, and just about sort of how the old masters, I've been watching a lot of videos about how they actually made their paintings, you know, the processes they used, the materials they used, which has been really good because it took me a long time to find that sort of stuff on YouTube. It was, a lot of the museum websites tend to have more that type of information. But a lot of it, because I'm kind of trying to learn about it, I'm not quite capable of making a video about it yet because I've still got to make it clear in my own head. But I'll maybe do a video and just show you some of the stuff that I've made. So now we are going for the paint sticks. And you'll see how smeary they are. The more layers you have in the gel plate, the less indication of where the stencils have been before. So I kind of do a mixture of kind of rubbing these on and patting them on. Obviously in a very small gap in the stencil, it's easier to pat them on. And some of them show up very well, like this red, and then other ones like the blue, surprisingly, doesn't show up that well on this side of the gel plate when you're applying it. However, it shows up just as well as the red at the, you know, when you pull the final print. So this is the purple one. So when I'm using them here, I'm very much kind of more looking at, I suppose, the edges and the gaps in the stencil. And the next time round, I use it more to sort of fill the negative space. I like these in contrast with the pan pastels, because these really do give the illusion of movement. They're very expressive, whereas the pan pastels are really precise and quite solid. These are also, I mean, they're easy enough to apply to the gel plate, but they're not something that you have much control over the amount of pressure or even how far you can move them for, like how big a space you can fill, because they're so smeary, but the gel plate doesn't allow you to move very far with them, if that makes sense. It's as if you're having to drag it. But the colours combine with the pan pastel colours really nicely. I'm sure tempera paint's quite transparent anyway. It's designed to be built up in sort of glazing layers, I think. Well, not designed for that, but it is used for that. I was a bit dubious when I seen it at this stage. I thought that just looks like a big smeary mess. But see the pan pastels, they really don't move underneath. I do think there is some combining between the paint stick and the pan pastel. Like, they do affect each other colour-wise. I'm not sure how much influence the paint stick has on the pan pastel, like if it does move it, but if it does, it's only very slight. Because they look quite muddy there, but they're definitely not when you see the pool. So I chose gold paint to lift this with. I would have used white, but because I've used the white pan pastel, I thought it was better to, choose another sort of neutral colour. And I actually find the gold and the silver acrylic paints to be good sort of background colours for pulling prints off the gel plate. So those paint sticks cost me £4 for 5 on Amazon. It says they take 90 seconds to dry, but I think with the sort of inconsistent thickness of it, when you're applying it, it could vary. But the acrylic paint went over it fine, so I think when it's on the gel plate it's hard to move anyway, so I just went ahead. Anyway, I love it. I think that the contrast between the pan pastels and the paint sticks is beautiful, but I also think that they're very harmonious together. They work very well together. So there's a lot of pan pastel left on the gel plate, and so I'm just using the tempera, the paint sticks again. Now this time I'm being a bit more carefree, and I'm not really thinking about the stencils themselves. I'm just kind of, because the gel plate is a lot less busy, it's easier to look at, so I suppose I'm looking at it as a whole rather than just as a stencil in a part. I will say when the pan pastels not on the gel plate, they do move a bit easier. But I kind of think that the fact that there is some difficulty moving them adds to the kind of overall look. Well, that was a moment of decision making, wasn't it? I think we went round the whole picture deciding. So the blue doesn't show up as well on this side of the gel plate, but it does when you lift the print. But I quite like that. It fits in well with the whole way you use the gel plate anyway, because there is a lot of hidden information as you build the layers up. So the mystery of where you've already put the blue paint stick down just adds to that. That was me wiping off the green because there was a lot of red paint from the previous print on it. But the paint sticks are actually pretty sturdy. It's not like the paint's getting mashed up or wasted. And they're at least an inch tall of the paint. So, I mean, I reckon these will last. There'll be a good few goes out them. I will give you my opinion in a future video. So this print does end up a lot lighter because it is a ghost print, and most of the sort of intense richness of the pan pastels came onto the first print. But there's almost a kind of freshness, a lightness to the ghost print. These were just made to be used together, I'm telling you. It's as if they bring each other alive. I think the pan pastels ground the kind of smeariness of the paint sticks, and the smeariness of the paint sticks make the pan pastels look more vibrant. So this is me repeating the process, but this time I'm applying the pan pastels in a more carefree manner as well, and probably in larger areas and a bit faster. Just, you know, the first time you do it, well, I'd done it a few times before then, but that was the first time today. You're more cautious, you're more thoughtful, and then the second time it's a bit more on automatic pilot. That stencil's never going to stick to the gel plate again. So that's some yellow ochre on top of the burnt sienna. So yes, so this time I'm really trying to look at it as a whole picture. And thinking about the sort of negative spaces rather than the stencils themselves. I also think that I've only put half my stencils down on the gel plate this time. Oh, I do like a filled in circle. I think I'm more confident this time because I've seen how good the effects are of the pan pastels and the paint sticks together. Do you see the difference of looking at it like from the whole composition point of view rather than just filling in parts of the stencil? Like, I feel like I'm backwards and forwards across the gel plate instead of just moving from part to part. It's difficult that the stencil keeps moving. I remember thinking at the time when I was doing this that it's, you know, it's almost like you're joining all the stencils together to be one big stencil. I wish I'd tried it with using the paint sticks first and then the pan pastels over the top. That would be interesting to see. I will try that. I think that in between, in the stripy circle stencil, it looks a bit like the old Pepsi sign. So there's less clarity between where the pan pastels been applied and where the stencils were this time, because there was some pan pastels left from before. Now, I've not used the black and white this time. I've just went straight into the paint sticks. Been quite liberal this time. I'm just like, just stick them down. However, the fourth print that I do, I don't show you the process, I just show you it. And the stencils were moving about everywhere, and I just decided to almost ignore them. And you do see the difference. It's a lot more childlike looking. You'll see it because I show you it. It's almost like I've just kind of made like L shapes and sort of curves. There's no real character to them. There's also not the difference in pressure as you're kind of trying to fit in between a stencil part and then drag across the gel plate a wee bit. It's more uniform looking. I'm watching this to do the voiceover with, and I'm actually itching to go back to the gel plate and do some more of these. That's a good sign, actually. I feel like this could be used in a lot of different ways, which is I love, because I love experimenting the gel plate. I love trying new things. I love something that you can do a lot of different ways. That's just sketchbook paper. I'm not sure what the GSM is. I think it's probably about 120. It doesn't feel particularly thick. There's something about that one. It's as if there's actually some light showing. So this is the fourth one that I was telling you about, with the very simple shapes done with the paint sticks, because the stencils were moving and I just gave up. And there is a huge difference. So that's the two ghost prints. And there's a complexity to the one underneath that's just not there in the top one, which is actually quite nice to see. And then, so these three I would keep together and use them together. I think they're lovely. And they always look better when they've got that nice black frame round them for the photos. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and take care, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.